What is up, Notre Dame fans? I'm Patrick Engel here at Allegiant Stadium after Notre Dame's 28-20 win over BYU, joined by my colleague Tyler Horka up in South Bend at Blue and Gold Illustrated. Tyler, Notre Dame third win in a row after that 0-2 start in a season that feels like it's kind of changing course for the better, at least as much as it can, after starting 0-2 and after the goals that they had coming into the year with national title playoff are probably off the table. But let's kind of start there before we dive into the nuts and bolts of this game here. Like Michael Mayer was asked about this afterward and said, like, I think this season is going the way we want it to, not in the sense of, oh, we're cool with losing to Marshall, but like in a way that the vibes are back. And I think you're seeing him play the last three or two and a half games, I guess, if you want to throw out the first half at Cal, more like you would have expected, and certainly maybe better than you expected now with Drew Pine and originally the QB2 at the controls now. So I don't know. What's been your impressions just as far as last three and kind of where this thing is might be starting to go or could go from here, Tyler?
Yeah, everybody that is watching this knows that I've been a proponent of Drew Pines for a long time. This goes back to last year, putting him in our top 25 rankings when really nobody else did. But I think you got to start there because obviously he's not the athletic specimen that you would like in a quarterback. He's not the prototypical guy, but the numbers don't lie. I mean, I put them out on Twitter. He's completing about 74% of his passes. He's thrown for 700 yards and 8 touchdowns with 1 interception in his 3 starts, and he's won all 3 of those games. So, but I also think you have to give some credit to Tommy Rees for kind of game planning for what he does best. I mean, today was the Michael Mayer show, and we'll probably get into a little bit of that where he had 11 catches for, I think it was 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I mean, Tommy Rees is kind of setting this up for Drew Pine to be successful, but Drew Pine still has to take that and make the throws and make the right decisions and not turn the ball over. His 1 interception today was a tipped pass. I think the lack of turnovers has been huge because you could throw a guy into a situation like this, especially with that big stadium that you're standing behind right there. You could throw a guy out there who's only started a couple games in his college career and he could fumble or he could throw a couple picks. I mean, Jaron Hall for BYU threw a pick on his first pass attempt today. If Drew Pine did that, it would have been catastrophic. So I think Drew Pine has kind of righted the course. And then obviously Notre Dame has done so many other great things around that. I mean, the defense is playing well. It's getting stops. And the wide receivers, Jaden Thomas steps up today. So I think the biggest thing for Notre Dame, into your larger point of this season is kind of shifting, is something new is appearing each and every game. Like today was Jaden Thomas catching 3 passes for, what was it, like 80 yards and a touchdown. So impressive stuff for Notre Dame to kind of keep pulling all of these things out because they were at a point 3 weeks ago where if some of these things weren't happening, if Drew Pine doesn't step up, if Michael Mayer doesn't be the Mackey, the Mackey Award guy that he is, like if the award was given today, he would win the Mackey Award. If all these things weren't happening, Notre Dame wouldn't be 3-2 right now.
We'll see how many Georgia fans are listening or watching this video and they come across it and start spamming Brock Bowers in the comments. But yeah, he's been as good as anyone. And I asked him about this afterward. Like, and no matter what, he's at top of every scouting report. Everyone's attention on third down, especially, like, you're going to throw to number 87. And well, even the times where he's not inexplicably wide open on those, which happens more than you would think any good defense would do. Like, this is their best tight end in the country. You should not leave him wide open. But let's go back to Pine for a moment. And that is probably too early to start on the whole, like, what does this mean for beyond 2022? Like, just take the remaining probably 8 games you have left to evaluate him and then use that from going forward. But it really is a big deal of how I think quickly he's not only gotten comfortable, but like excelled in this and been a reason that Notre Dame has won. I mean, just look at the past 2 games here of who's been on the other side at quarterback. Drake May, a really, really talented former top 50-ish recruit at North Carolina, first-year starter, but a guy who looks like a potentially really, really dynamic quarterback. And then Jaron Hall today, a guy who's had a lot of NFL draft buzz, a multi-year starter, a guy who's I think he's like 22 or 23, like did the 2-year Mormon mission, but a guy who's been around, been started in big games and been in a system for a while and been there. And Pine outplayed both of them. Like, I don't think you can minimize how much of an impact that had on just why Notre Dame is where it's at so far, and why they were able to really get out to that big start and kind of make BYU play from behind in the way they did. Like, you just don't see a whole lot of like, skittishness or afraid of the moment or anything like that. And I mean, really, it was one kind of bad decision was that interception where, it was tipped, but he was throwing it toward two defenders, and right as he's winding up to throw it, I'm like, knowing it's going to be Mayer, it's like, oh, that's going to get picked. So, but yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from Pine or from this game and from the last three as a whole is just exactly what Pine has given them and how quickly it's gotten to that point.
Yeah, and I'll kind of shift gears here and talk about how Notre Dame was able to possess the ball in this game, because you mentioned Jaren Hall. We didn't really see all he had to offer, and I think that a lot of that had to do with Notre Dame having the ball for 40 minutes and 55 seconds in this game, and they were able to run the ball. You'll look at it. I think BYU had a better yards per carry average than Notre Dame did, surprisingly, at 5.5 to 5.2. But Notre Dame had way more attempts, and they were able to just churn out yards, churn out first downs when they needed to. You saw it on that last possession where that's complimentary football if you've ever seen it, where Notre Dame needs a stop on 4th and 1, and they get it with Jason Adamalola. And there were a whole lot of other guys that had really good push on that play too, but he's the guy that kind of finishes the play. But then Notre Dame needs stops on the other side. And what do you get? Logan Diggs running free for 33 yards. Audric Estime, questionable first down there at the end, but that was a physical run on 3rd and 4. And I think Notre Dame did the right thing, put the ball in your big bruiser's hands, and he got right around the line of scrimmage. So I'm not sure Notre Dame doesn't go for that right there, because BYU still needs to score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion. So complimentary football took Jaren Hall out of what he wanted to do. I don't know if he looked right anyway. That first pass was a little questionable. And then, Patrick, you were there. You probably saw a lot of throws where you were like, what is Jaren Hall doing here? But, I mean, you cannot understate the fact that Notre Dame had the ball for 2/3 of this game. I think that was huge.
Yeah, BYU ran 16 plays in the first 29 minutes of game time. Like, that is really, really low, and a testament to the complimentary football, like you mentioned. And the total rushing numbers there that were on the screen a minute ago, I think were probably more than Notre Dame probably wanted at the end there, or at least in yards per carry at 5.5 is probably going to stick in their craw a little bit, especially with some of those second half runs. But it hurt less and didn't maybe feel like quite as much, just because it wasn't there until the second half when BYU's trying to play catch up. And when at some point they're going to have to go to Jaren Hall on a day where he just didn't look right from the beginning. And yeah, there were a lot of throws there that were just like, is he healthy? Is it something just not there? Because that just wasn't what he has been for the last year and a half as their starter. But yeah, I really think this was a game where Notre Dame, you figured they would be able to win the line of scrimmage on both sides, and you certainly saw that today in the total rushing number, and especially there at the end where it's like they're going to run it, and they do, and they stay on the field and they bleed the clock out, and at the spot where they didn't 3 weeks ago at Cal, and after some times in this game where there were moments where they didn't win up front, like on the fourth and down there, and if it's short year has just really been kind of a weakness for them all year. But to be able to end it on that note, I think was a positive for them. And after, stretches there a little bit where it's like, the run wasn't quite where they wanted it to be, but Pine, and like we talked about, able to still give them a pulse on offense for the entire game there.
Yeah, my final takeaway in all of this is we just saw the drive charts there. Notre Dame had 4 drives in a row where they sustained a drive for at least 10 plays. One of those was the drive where they went for it on 4th down, their in-goal situation. You want to get that every single time, but even that drive had a hand in Notre Dame controlling the clock, controlling the game. It felt like Notre Dame was in total control. The score will say they only won by 1 possession, but, I mean, we saw it. Notre Dame got up. At one point, they were winning by 3 scores, right? So they really controlled this thing from start to finish, and that is huge for a team that, 4 weeks ago against Marshall looked like Marshall controlled the entire game on Notre Dame's field at Notre Dame Stadium. It was honestly quite embarrassing for that to happen. They come out here against the number 16 team in the country, control the game. The defense, there were some lapses there. You don't want BYU to ever pick up 3rd and 18 on the ground with a 20-yard gain and then score a few plays later on a 28-yard rushing touchdown. That's got to get cleaned up. But the offense and what it was able to do to control this game kind of made that a moot point because at the end it didn't really matter. BYU was going to have to make more plays, and in the end, the defense steps up. So really complimentary football, like I said. And Notre Dame has games against Stanford and UNLV coming up at home, and Syracuse. There's a real chance, I'll leave it on this note, that they're sitting there at 6-2 when Clemson comes to town. And I don't think anybody thought that would be the case when they were 0-2 after a loss to Marshall.
No, not at all. And you mentioned those drives. Like, you look at the drives that BYU had either before or after it in the stretch of those four. Like, that's really the difference in the game and why this felt like a game that wasn't as close as the final score indicates for a while, or maybe shouldn't have been as close as the final score indicated, just from how Notre Dame controlled it there, put BYU in a hole that, even though it clawed back probably more than Notre Dame wanted to, it still ultimately couldn't get over that hump. So Notre Dame 28, BYU 20. Irish are 3-2 after winning their third straight and will host Stanford at home for the first of two home games. He's Tyler Horka. I'm Patrick Engel. Thanks for watching.